SpinSheet magazine. Wondering if we are live at the moment. And actually, I think we are. Sweet. Very good. The little message box up on the screen kind of messed me up, said Facebook has stopped your broadcast. No! Anyway, thanks for joining us. It's another edition of the SpinSheet Happy Hour brought to you by our friends at Mount Gay Rum. Yay! And it's a Friday. I'm glad you're able to join us. Today's topic is going to be safety briefings, and I think this is actually really cool. Our guest today has got an incredible background in sailing, and I think will be really entertaining for us all to just kind of figure out what to do and what not to do, and obviously what's important to cover. So just real quick, I'm going to bring Molly on, and here she comes. Hey, Malls.
Hey, Sharp. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you. How's it going?
It's going pretty well.
Now, you're looking pretty snazzy.
Well, I got a new jacket.
Oh, look at that. That's right.
Mm-hmm. Would you like to hear about some of the features?
Of course. I think our friends would at home.
Yes, it's nice high collar, and it's got nice black lining on the inside. It's an indoor weight fleece, I would say, more than an outdoor weight, which also makes it a really good layering fleece. It has a couple of nice features of this sort of racing stripes on the back. It's got a little pocket right here, which is not quite big enough for my phone, but it's it's good for your credit card and your house key and a Kleenex. It also has some nice inside pockets and some zipper pockets on the side. And I love my new jacket.
Awesome.
I hope you guys like it, because this is my Friday outfit from now until tomorrow.
That's right. That's right. I opted for the what I'm calling now the bug out bag.
Nice.
Which is just a great big duffel bag, but I love it because it's a good weekender. And
yeah, in the time of COVID, you're like, I'm going away for the weekend. I'm going somewhere. I'm putting stuff in a bag, I'm going somewhere. It's so exciting.
Yes.
I've only done it twice since this whole thing started, but
yeah,
you a bag, you're ready.
I'm done. I'm ready to go. Well, we've got a really cool show lined up.
Yeah, we have Renee Mel from the Naval Academy Offshore Sail Training Squadron, and she has an incredible sailing resume. Plus, she's been teaching mids for a long time. She does a lot of offshore sailing, and you might have read that article in the February issue of SpinSheet, for which she was one of the people who was interviewed. And anyway, she has a lot to teach us, so I'm excited to hang out with Renee this evening.
Cool.
And hear more about what she has to say about how we can all do a little better doing safety.
The first thing in any good safety briefing on a boat, right? The exits are all around you. All right.
I was kind of scared of your answer, but I like it.
You never know what I'm going to say, right?
All right.
Well, let's bring Renee on and say hello.
Hi, Renee.
Hi, Molly. Hi, Sharp.
Hello.
Hey, welcome to SpinSheet Happy Hour.
Thank you. Cheers. I have my Mount Gay and ginger all teed up here for our safe talk.
Try to go toward the center with your cheers if you can.
Figure
out how to do that. There you go. Ding, ding.
You're pro at this.
What are you? You're drinking Mount Gay and ginger. What are you drinking, Sharp?
Actually, I have Mount Gay on a rock. One cube.
Is it a big rock?
Not anymore. But I just figured out a few minutes before we came on that I don't have any ginger. So, hey, me too. It's not like I'm going to go without a drink, right? So anyway, cheers.
Cheers. I'm actually drinking in this fancy glass. I'm drinking a little mocktail tonight. So I didn't sleep very well last night. I have some stuff to do tonight, and I thought I can't get all goofy over happy hour. I've got things to do.
It's true. I hate it when you show up all sloshed.
It happens. It happens.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm gonna go into the background like I do, and I'll join you guys for last call.
All right, Char. Well, feel free to pop on if you have a question, because we have a little bit more space tonight since we only have one guest. So, Renee, I'm really glad you could make it tonight. You've been on my list for a while, and before we talk about your job, let's talk a little bit about your personal sailing experience, because I know you started on a very fancy boat there in the Midwest, and we'd like to hear. You won't be the first of our guests who started on this boat, but let's start at the beginning.
It seems to be a popular place to start. I started my illustrious sailing career on a Snark, which is sort of the same size as a laser, single person boat, although we would fit the whole family on it. And the construction is markedly different than a laser. It's essentially a cooler. It's a
I've never heard anyone say that.
It's
Styrofoam, I've heard.
core encased in fiberglass, the same way they build coolers. So that was how I got my start. We won it in a raffle when I was in junior high, I think. And I had an aunt and uncle who had a bigger boat that we cruised with when we went down to visit them in Ohio, but that didn't happen very often. So we learned how to sail in the Snark. I moved from there to work at this little local yacht club when I was in college because I needed a job during college during the summers. I thought, wait tables, make some money. Oh no, I went in to interview for the job and they said, well, we've got this fleet of sunfish and we were looking for a sailing instructor. I've never had any formal sailing training. I'm 18. I don't know what I'm doing. It's like, oh, don't worry. We have some members. They'll point you in the right direction. So I got this little fleet of sunfish and started figuring things out. And basically that kind of set the hook. So when I went back to college, I learned they had a sailing team there, Michigan State sailing team. And when I went there, I met a person by the name of Dawn Riley, which kind of helped shape the rest of my sailing career. And we sailed dinghies together on Lake Lansing and started to sail big boats with her in Lake St. Clair during the summer. And that led to doing a MAC race. And, I thought, I'm doing a MAC race on a 30-footer. This is really a big boat. And that moved, did a fair bit of racing in the Great Lakes. And then I wound up getting a job out here on a Baltic 43. That's how I moved to Annapolis. I got a job to be the boat captain there. I'd been kind of the second in command or the mate for Dawn on this first 45 back in the lakes and down in Florida for the SRC. And then I met Bill Stites, who had Dancer. I moved out here, did a whole bunch of racing, took the boat up and down the East Coast, down to Florida during the wintertime, up to New England for the racing circuit up there during the summer. Wound up when I was in Florida, meeting all the other boat captains and wound up doing some racing in the 50-foot class. Still kept in touch with Dawn. We started doing some women's match racing. And eventually that association with Dawn led me to getting a phone call from her after they'd already completed one leg of the 93-94 Whitbread. So she asked me if I wanted to go sail the Whitbread. I thought she was kidding. I said, oh, you're kidding. They've already started. She had tried to do her own campaign, but didn't quite get it together for that particular Whitbread. And so I thought, sure, I kind of helped her out with that a little bit. So when she called me, I thought she was just kind of pulling my leg because I knew that they were already on their way to South America. But she's like, no, they, the boat that we would sail on has had some issues and, they need a skipper and a couple crew. So I had to give her my answer the next morning. So I had basically 24 hours to make up my mind to go sail around the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
So did you miss a leg? Is that what I'm hearing? Or
I missed the first leg. Okay. So in the bigger world of, sailing safely, I don't advise deciding to go into an around the world race with 24 hours notice. But yeah. I had a lot of experience running a boat. I'd done a transatlantic delivery from England to Bermuda on a VOC 60. We actually we tried to do the fastnet on that boat, but had some breakdowns, so didn't quite complete that race. But I did do a transatlantic on it. We sailed it from England to Amsterdam for a boat show, and like I said, sailed all up and down the East Coast and either the the Baltic 43, did a bunch of racing in the Great Lakes, which can be pretty brutal conditions out there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a lot of people are familiar with Dawn Riley as one of the crew members on the Maiden, after seeing that movie. So this was this 4 years after she did the Maiden trip?
It was. She went and did Maiden, which was the first all-women crewed around the world team. And then when she came back from that, like I said, she had tried to put together her own campaign, and I helped her with some marketing for that. And she asked if she could put my name on the crew list. And, I'm not a big fan of cold weather sailing, to be perfectly honest. But I said, sure. But if you get, when you get the money, you can, ask me for real. But, I don't know what I want to do. But when it came down to it, and I had spent all that time sailing already, and it was pretty hard to say no to that sort of adventure.
Now, I don't mean to dwell on the Whitbread, which later became the Volvo Ocean Race, but as we were chatting right before we went live, I also didn't want to be like, so you started in a Snark, and then you did the Volvo, and then you sailed a J80. That we sort of were like, whoa, you sailed around the world. Let's just stop here for a minute, because it certainly establishes you as an expert on doing safety briefings, in addition to your job right now. But I have to ask you one Volvo Ocean Race question, and maybe we'll have you back on when we're talking just about sailing around the world. But before we move on to safety briefings, I want to ask you about the Southern Ocean.
Absolutely.
Was it as scary as they say it is? Tell me about the Southern Ocean.
It was pretty spectacular. I used to be one of those people that said, oh, I wish I don't want to do an around the world race, but I just wish I could, drop in on a helicopter, in the middle of the Southern Ocean. I can tell you would not want to do that. It was a good gradual easing into it. We had about almost a week to, really get the boat ready once we got down to South America, because we joined the boat in Uruguay with a couple other crew members. But it started out, the first week was pretty calm, and then we got into our first big, low pressure system in the Southern Ocean, and the water was coming over the deck like a fire hose. I remember I was sitting on the deck trimming, and I have a dent in the side of my legs still from the water that just picked me up and slammed me into the winch that was downstream of me. There were quiet moments. There were absolutely spectacular moments. There were really scary moments. There was a low pressure system we were in for about 3 days where it was blowing between 35 and 50. Not too far before we got to Cape Horn, and I think that's actually when our steering system got damaged, and we had problems with the mainsail track and the slugs that were on there. I remember spending one Friday night up at the top spreader, in the dark in the Southern Ocean, trying to get one of the slugs to actually work on the slide again so that we could reef when we needed to. And it was one of those moments where I kind of sat and wondered, it's like, I wonder what my friends are doing right now. It's not this.
Yeah. Well, it's always a kind of, I don't know, heartening to me or something when I find out like, people sailing around the world, they're really just still fighting with one of the slugs. You know what I mean? Like it's still sort of the same thing, just on a much larger scale. So when it comes to safety, can you list maybe the top thing you learned about safety, or the top couple of things you learned about safety while doing an around the world race?
Well, definitely I learned what not to do was to say you're going to go do a race at 24 hours notice in a week to fix everything that was broken on the boat when we got down there. Lots of lists, lots of redundancies. Let me check back my notes. Get experience before you go out and start tackling some of the more strenuous offshore races. If you have your heart set on doing one of the Bermuda races, whether it's Annapolis to Bermuda, Newport, Bermuda, or the Celestial one, try to get out and do some deliveries, get out of the bay and do some deliveries and get some training. I don't think I had the benefit of doing the safety at seas that we have now prior to my myself getting involved in the offshore sailing that I did. I did take as much training as I could find at the time, but every little bit helps. Looking back now, hindsight's 2020. I wish I knew then what I know now. Kind of went about it backwards, but and it's the little things. It's the people. You've got to make sure your people are in the best condition they can possibly be. Obviously, it's pretty strenuous when you're out there in 40, 50 knots, 60 knots, really big waves. You've got to take care of yourself. You've got to take care of your people. And you've got to take care of the boat. So it's the little things like the slugs and just keeping up on the daily boat checks when you're offshore and the boat's bouncing around, and it's that little cotter pin that works its way out of the clevis pin that's holding the rig up that can be a problem.
Yeah, big time. So before we move on to the next question, I see someone in the audience did ask, because he missed the very beginning. And so we're talking to Renee Mill from the U.S. Naval Academy Offshore Sail Training Squadron. And many moons ago, she did a Whitbread race, now the Volvo Ocean Race. If you could just say what year that you did it in the name of the boat.
Sure. It was the 93, 94 Whitbread, and the boat was called Heineken.
Okay.
Which
Great.
was our sponsor at the time. So
great. Well, let's talk about your career at the Naval Academy and what you do there now. I know you had at least one other position before you moved into the position you're in now. And maybe you can just sort of talk about what your job has been there, because I know that safety has been a huge part of it since the beginning.
Sure. I'm actually coming up on my 14-year anniversary. I started on Valentine's Day in 2007.
Oh, congratulations.
Thanks. The first 4 years I was there, I was the Vanderstar safety chair. So, and all the years of working on boats, running boats, and being the safety inspectee, and then the 11 years that I spent working at FAR International and being a class measurer with the FAR 40s, MUM 30s, MUM 36s, Crawl 45s, and being, a safety equipment inspector. It was a good lead up into that Naval Academy job. So I worked with all the sailing programs. We actually have 4 sailing programs there. The Plebe Summer Sailing program, which teaches people how to sail on Colgate 26s, only we call them Navy 26s. We have the intercollegiate sailing team. It's a varsity team. We have the varsity offshore sailing team, and we have the program that I switched into 10 years ago, which is the Offshore Sail Training Squadron. It's a summer training program. We take midshipmen that are typically pretty novice. They've had a little bit of sailing during their plebe year, maybe on the 26s. We train them how to sail the boat and take care of all the systems, go through all the checklists, do voyage prep. We teach them all that in a week, and then we go sail somewhere on the East Coast. So we go as far up as Boston in recent years. We've been to Charleston before, take about a week to sail up there. Then we spend a weekend, do some community outreach while we're in port for the weekend. And the goal is to teach them experiential leadership, seamanship, and navigation. So we take all of the subjects that they've learned in the classroom and we let them practice those skills in a real life dynamic situation, because it's pretty dynamic when you have a storm coming and you just learned how to sail last week and you have to figure out what to do. And, it's very rewarding, and it's a great challenge for them, and it helps set them up for whatever branch of the service that they wind up going into.
Great. So when it comes to sailing, I know you do some sailing personally as well as sailing for your job. I wonder if you ever end up on boats where no one does a safety briefing. And I asked that for a reason, because I have done a lot of sailing on boats where no one does a safety briefing. And without naming names, I can tell you one that the engine was always running when you got there. And, leaving the dock was really fast, to the point where sometimes one of the guests might be in the cockpit, with a purse in her hand without anyone saying, you can stash that down below. And, you may never have used a head on a boat before. This is how to use it. Or can you swim? Because if not, we have a life jacket for you. Some of those basic things. So I would say for someone like that, who might be a really experienced sailors just not doing safety briefings, what would sort of be your first recommendation to start adopting some safety briefing into your practice?
So for boat owners or long-time regular crew members, if you're a boat owner, it's a great idea, especially if you've got somebody who's never sailed. You want to take them out on a Wednesday night race to show them what it's all about, have a great time. You definitely should point out what the safety area or what the danger areas of the boat are. They call it a boom for a reason. Be careful of open hatches when you're going down the main companionway. You should probably, not go down forwards, go down backwards so you don't fall. There's handholds. One of my volunteers in the program, I think, was the one who told me this saying, just grab a hold of something silver, so the lifelines, if there's a grab rail, backstay, the shrouds, if you're moving around the boat, obviously one hand for yourself, one hand for the boat. Everybody learns that one fairly early on in sailing and racing. And it depends on whether you're cruising or racing. My program is kind of more of a cruisy side of things, but I still race, and just getting people familiar with where are the life jackets, like you said, where are the fire extinguishers, where's the handheld radio. It's typically up on deck for the start because you want to hear the countdown. But those are the kind of questions. Those are the kinds of things that you should be briefing. And if you're regular crew, long-term crew on a boat, appoint yourself the safety officer, or ask the owner, hey, can I be the safety officer? I'll take care of that. You can delegate that down. Just if you're the owner, make sure you train that person up. And if you're relatively new to sailing, or you're new to a boat and to a crew, ask lots of questions. Ask if everybody's busy and they don't have time, just say, hey, do you mind if I take a few minutes and just look around down below so I can figure out where things are, and ask questions of how do you use the head. If you've got enough experience to know what, you don't know this particular boat, but you know what you should know. Just be curious, ask questions, be nosy.
You mentioned
but nosy.
in the SpinSheet issue that just came out, there was an article for which Cindy Wallach interviewed you, and you mentioned, she said on a couple of occasions, using the VHF radio and how important it is for everyone on board to know how to use that. A lot of people don't know how to use one. If they've never used one, why would they, right? So can you just sort of walk us through how you would explain to a new person how to use a VHF? So sometimes I think people think they're good at explaining things they're not actually that good at explaining.
Sure. It's an important tool because it's going to get you help a lot faster than calling 911 on your phone. That's going to route you to a dispatch. They're going to route it to the Coast Guard. Whereas if you make a call on VHF, if all you know is that how to turn the dial to get to channel 16, where the volume is, and what the squelch is, and how to adjust that, and how to, you've got the microphone, you do the push to talk, then release it. It's like a walkie-talkie. Most people are familiar with that concept. And that if you make a distress call on channel 16, everybody's probably familiar with Mayday, but there are two other levels too. Mayday is, you're really, no kidding, you're in a lot of trouble. Pon is the next level down, where it's like, we've got a pretty serious problem, or, we're taking on a lot of water. We think we have it under control, but we want the boats around us to know that we have a problem. Or just a security. It's like, hey, it's pea soup fog out here. We're coming up to the entrance, or to the bottom of the Chesapeake, and we know there's a lot of traffic down here. So this is, the sailing vessel, Three Musketeers, and we're traveling in the fog, and we're about 2 miles from the bridge, just for all concerned traffic. So it's in addition to being able to call the Coast Guard, mariners are required to monitor channel 16 if they have a VHF radio. Not everybody does. The commercial traffic will, the tugboats will, the ships will. So if you make a distress call, everybody who's within VHF range, which if you're on low power is just a few miles, if you're on high power, It can be up to, say, 25 miles. Everybody that's in the vicinity that is in a position to help you will hear that, and they'll figure out where you are. It's good if you're in the bay to give a geographic reference rather than a lat long, because it takes a lot longer to plot that out. It's like, hey, we're in the vicinity of R2 or Bloody Point or Thomas Point, Blue Boat. We're on fire. look for the flames and come help us.
Yeah. Can you just explain a little? I mean, you sort of explained it, but I find that there's a lot of confusion between a Mayday and a pon-pon. Hair on fire, Mayday. What can you give some specific examples of things that you would think of as Maydays, and then one step below to what would be a pon-pon?
Sure. Mayday, anytime you have a fire on board, that would be a Mayday, unless you immediately put it out. But if you've got a fire that's on the boat, a boat can sink in minutes. I've read articles recently about a cruising couple who sailed across the Pacific or around the world, and they were within miles of their home and their batteries caught fire, and the boat sank within minutes, literally minutes. They just didn't have time to get anything. So that would be, loss of life, or your boat sinking underneath you. Mm-hmm. Pon-pon is, hey, we just got this big hole in our boat, like American Magic, for instance. There was plenty of boats around and they have a support boat, but that would be a good example of a pon-pon. They were on their side, the boat was close to, actually that might be closer to a Mayday, but they had plenty of support around, so it wasn't as dire because they had plenty of help. You're taking on water. I can think of an instance where somebody got a line wrapped around their prop, and it actually became a big issue because they were taking on a lot of water. They couldn't control it because it was coming in through the prop shaft. And that was definitely a pon-pon. The Coast Guard came out, or it might have been like a sea tow came out and dropped off a pump for them. That was serious. They weren't going to sink in the next 5 minutes, but they were having trouble getting the ingress of water under control. So that would be more of a pon-pon.
And the security is probably used, a lot more often, or one would hope.
Pardon?
The security.
So for instance, we go out and do a lot of training with my program because we want the MIDs to be familiar with all the safety equipment that's on the boat. So on our overnight, we'll go out and we'll do a night man overboard with either the strobe light, or we'll put some of those glow sticks in a water bottle and tie it to a life jacket, or we'll throw the man overboard, pull with the strobe light attached to it to the back. And if you're another mariner out there and you see a strobe light, you might be a little concerned that somebody is actually in trouble. So what we'll do is we'll issue a security call. It's like, security. This is Sailing Vessel Valiant conducting night man overboard drills in the vicinity of Bloody Point Light. All concerned traffic stand by. Channel 16, 82 Alpha.
Great. That helps a lot. Thank you. You already mentioned a couple of other things that that we could put into a safety briefing, such as where are the life jackets, how you use the marine head. Can you talk about some of the other equipment you might want to know where it is down below on the boat, such as a fire extinguisher?
Where are the fire extinguishers? If there's an emergency tiller, that's a good thing to know where that is. Mm-hmm. If there is a John Boy or a life sling, those items should be on the back. If there's a heaving line, that should be tied on to one of the lifelines readily accessible to the helmsman. Throw cushion, so if you do have a man overboard, there's some things that you can throw in the water to litter the water and provide flotation for the person in the water if they don't happen to be wearing a life jacket, and maybe alert other boats. If you're doing this during a race, and a couple of years ago I was racing a J80, and somebody on the boat in front of us at the top mark fell off. And it was pretty congested, as you can imagine. And in one design fleet, everybody's trying to get around the top mark in pretty, close quarters. And we were the boat right behind them, and we were able to pull her onto our boat. And retired and sailed back in. She was fine, but the danger is also, maybe having somebody run over, but if there's a bunch of stuff in the water, which we didn't really have time to throw, but it could be, being able to track back to the vicinity of where that person went overboard. So those are some important things to know about. If you're going offshore, is there an EPIRB? If you have, an inflatable life jacket and you're going offshore, is there a PLB in there? And one of the sometimes overlooked things too is not just where is the safety equipment, but how do you use it? Not just the VHF, but how do you operate the PLB, or how do you operate the EPIRB? Where's the on-off? Do I turn it on if I see an airplane and turn it off?
Newer sailors, can you just explain for anyone who might not be that experienced? Can you explain what an EPIRB and a PLB? They might know what an EPIRB is, but PLB is, I don't know, a little bit newer to the lingo. So
sure. So EPIRB is an emergency position indicating radio beacon, and that sends a radio signal. Some of them have GPS embedded as well, up to the satellites and then to the rescue center. So if your boat is sinking and you're going to get into the life raft, you make sure you grab that device and turn it on, and that's going to alert somebody on shore at the Coast Guard station, who can then let the closest Coast Guard asset, or the closest asset might be a commercial ship. There's a worldwide network of commercial ships that can help rescue mariners in distress. A lot of times, if you hear of ships picking up people off of a life raft, it's because there's this worldwide system called AMVER, where they can get alerted by that one little handy piece of safety equipment you have on your boat. If a person goes overboard, there's a similar device, much smaller, that will pack into your inflatable life jacket. It's called a personal locator beacon. They work on a couple different formats. Some of them work off of AIS, so automatic identification system. If you've got your chart plotter on the boat is equipped with AIS, you can see other boats with AIS, and you can also see this beacon in the water, so it can help track you back to the person in the water. Some of them work on the same principle that your EPIRB works on, and some of them will work on both, and that technology is rapidly changing.
So you mentioned a little bit in the article about establishing a chain of command, and I thought, that's just such a great idea on every boat, because it's just good to know who's the boss. How would you recommend that a crew establishes a change of command, even if they're just going out for a quiet day sail and a couple of new people are on the boat?
Sure. I'm just going to turn the running lights on here. 1 second.
Yeah, it's getting dark, isn't it?
Getting a little dark in here. Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
So chain of command, you've got your skipper is the person in command, and that's going to either be the owner of the boat typically, or a trusted, person that is sailing the boat all the time. I know the G105 that I sail on a regular basis. If the owner can't make it, the bowman will take the boat out and go race. If you don't have that person, you should designate one of those people, because if something happens to you, you want to have somebody that knows where everything is. It can be responsible to make the VHF call, that can direct a man overboard a recovery drill, that can, hopefully you've got somebody on the boat that has some knowledge of first aid to at least do triage until help arrives, whether it's the Coast Guard locally or another boat. But it's really important that you have, somebody that's clearly in command and somebody who can back that person up. In fact, I just did a Storm Trysail Club day-long symposium on how to best help train leaders on boats to be safer offshore. We've kind of looked at some of the incidents lately that could have benefited from having a little bit stronger leadership structure. And so we're looking at ways that we can help people become better leaders on the boat and hopefully prevent incidents in the future.
Yeah, I'm remembering a time when I hopped on a boat to do an overnight race with this group I'd never raced with before. And I felt so comfortable right away because of the safety briefing, but also the way that they let me know, this is the person who's going to tell you what to do. This is the person who drives the boat. And when he tells you to do this, listen to that guy. And then we're going to switch. But they were very clear on who did what and who I needed to listen to and where they needed me to physically be. Mm-hmm. And it was one of the nicest experiences I've had going on board a boat with people I didn't know. And I think that's a great skill for people to hone, figuring out their role on the boat and how to explain it to people. That's the hard part. I think sometimes a group of people who sail together a lot, they know what their roles are and they know the way they do things, so they might not have ever verbalized it.
Communications is really important, especially in an emergency. So I've been on boats where people are great. Everybody works well together. And if something, goes wrong with the takedown, you really don't have to communicate a whole lot. Just a couple words will kind of get people moving in the right direction because they all have the experience and know, they know what needs to get done to solve the problem. But that's not a substitute for, having good, clear communications. And, one of the things in the Navy or in a lot of most of the serious offshore stuff that I've done, you've got designated jobs. So if you're the navigator in an emergency, you are going to be the one that's on the VHF radio. If you're the bow person, maybe you're the one that is responsible for making sure everybody has a life jacket if it gets to the point where you're going to have to abandon ship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's similar to your experience. Everybody, it sounds like had been designated a job.
Yeah, and they all did their jobs really well and didn't step on each other's toes, which is nice. They helped each other. Can you think of a real life dangerous situation that you have been in for which the safety briefing really helped? That you recognized later, boy, I'm really glad we did that because this went sideways.
I can think of a couple instances where I was the safety inspector on a boat. Just off the top of my head, I might come back to the answer of a personal event, but I can think of two instances where I was a safety inspector. One was when I was working with the FAR 40 class. And one of the requirements, if you have, wood plugs for your through hulls as DC or damage control plugs, that they have to be tied on to, the boat in some form or fashion in the vicinity of where the through hull is. And I was at a regatta once, and the boat captain from a boat from Norway came up to me and said, "I'm really glad you made me tie those on because we were doing a delivery across the North Sea. And I think it was a hose had popped off the through hull." And, he said, "I'm really glad that was tied on because if it hadn't been, I never would have found it, it would have been floating away somewhere in the boat."
That's a heck of a time to be like, where did I put that thing? Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure at the time I told him it had to be tied on, that I was probably getting a little bit of grief from him, but it was nice at the end of the day that it actually made a big difference. And the other one was, I remember insisting that somebody have metal hacksaw blades, metal cutting hacksaw blades. Again, it's a requirement through the rules, but it's like, no, make sure you have them. And that boat subsequently lost their rig. And again, to get the thanks afterward that, they had what they needed on board was pretty gratifying.
Mm-hmm. We do have a question from the audience. Sharp, if you want to. Renee, have you ever been in an abandoned ship situation?
I have not.
I'm glad.
Actually. Yes, me too. I seriously, there were some times in the Southern Ocean when it felt like it might be the issue, when you're in a situation and your life kind of flashes, or at least the next couple of minutes of possibilities flash through your head. It was a very dark and a very stormy night in the Southern Ocean, and we had already jibed a couple of times because the boats had water ballast, and obviously we were sailing with a preventer, but the seas were pretty unsettled because we were between weather systems. And a couple of times earlier, when we had jibed, the preventer had broken, which is never a good thing on a boat with runners. The boat jibed, we were pinned over, the main was pinned up against the runner. I think I was in the situation where I had my oil rigger gloves on, which are these big, huge rubber gloves with fleece lining, and my hands are underwater trying to take the runner off the winch, and they're submersed in phosphorescence while we're bouncing around out there. And all I could kind of was running through my mind, it's like, great, the rig is going to come out, it's going to fall down, it's going to poke a hole in the boat, and we're going to have to, get in the life raft. So kind of the scenario was running through my head as that situation was playing out. Thankfully, that did not happen. We got ourselves back on our feet, and then the water ballast is kind of pinning you over too, besides the rig.
Yeah, I just being a sailing editor, and it's probably the same thing. And being in your world, I get news about abandoned ships. I'm enough that I'm scared. I'm probably scarier than most people. I'm not sailing off the Carolinas. A boat goes they do too many emergency rescues in that part of the ocean, So,
well, it's fun. I was actually talking to Dawn the other day, and she works up at Oak Cliff. She's the executive director at Oak Cliff Sailing up in Long Island now, and she was working on some flashcards for her Acorn students, and they were drills that they were going to have to do when they were coming back in from the race course. So maybe your flash card says, do an abandoned ship drill. So this is, it's something we do in my program at work as well, where, we have the scenarios. It's like, okay, here are all your assignments. If this is your ability or job on the boat, this is what you're going to have to do. And this, if there's a fire, this is what you do. If there's an abandoned ship drill, you're responsible to grab the E-curve. You're responsible to grab the water, and the extra granola bars or Pop-Tarts are pretty popular with the kids. So that's something that you can actually kind of work into your own practice, doing some fun drills like that.
Or at least I was going to ask you about drills, so I'm glad you brought that up. What kind of drills can, I might not be going to the Southern Ocean. I think it's highly unlikely at this point, but I do plan on doing a lot more cruising on the Chesapeake, and probably some charity racing and stuff like that. So if you can think of just some drills that some ordinary crews can do when they're out practicing this spring, hopefully soon.
Yep, sure. Well, that's been kind of my mantra a little bit through that seminar that I just went through on the leadership thing was, it's train the way you fight the way you train. So while you're going out to the race course, or maybe it's more comfortable to do it when you're coming back in from the race course, throw in a man overboard drill. If it's nice out and it's safe and nobody's going to get run over, you could put a real person in there in the water, but just think about it, talk it through first. I don't advocate putting a real person in the water for a man overboard drill unless you've got a pretty controlled situation. We do it at the Academy for the safety at sea, typically in the spring, but we have coach boats and we have the river closed off, so there is no other traffic. But you can simulate one pretty easily. If you want to be more realistic, attach some sort of weight to the life jacket, so it's a little harder to pull out of the water. And on our boats at work, we just use the boat hook to fish out the K-Pop life jacket that we throw overboard. But in reality, you're not going to poke your best friend in the eyeball with the boat hook. So, how else you're going to get them back on board? You could do a fire drill. How long does it take to get everybody up on deck, or, who's going to man the fire extinguishers? One thing that they use in professional racing is each crew member has a number So say the skipper's number 1, the navigator's number 2, the bowman's number 3, and in any kind of an accident, especially when you're traveling at 50 knots during the America's Cup, if something were to happen, everybody immediately sounds off. I think they're a little bit more advanced than just sounding off now. I'm pretty sure they have an electronic means of doing that. But it's a really quick way of accounting for everybody, because that's your first concern when something happens, is making sure that everybody's okay and accounted for. And then you go into damage control.
We have another audience question that is along those lines. If you want to, it's from Greg Gutman. Do you ever do an electronics outage drill? See if folks remember how to navigate without the gadgets. I do this. Thanks, Greg, for visiting us again at SpinSheet Happy Hour. He's a regular. So
excellent. Yeah, that's a great drill. We require the mids to pass a check ride after their overnight, and to get them away from the shiny objects, you can put the cover on the Furuno and just have them DR, dead reckon, with a chart and a hockey puck, handheld compass, and do manual plotting. Because if your electronics do go out, that's how you're going to have to figure out where you are. Is just do visual fixes. And I know that we have some really great electronics now, but I can remember doing the Miami to Montego Bay race several years ago on a chartered boat, and the instruments didn't work until we were almost at the finish line. So we had to dead reckon through the Bahamas.
Yeah, you had to get back to your real skills, right?
Exactly.
So we're going to run out of time here, but I have to ask you about safety at sea. I know running the Safety at Sea program is a big part of your job at the Naval Academy, and I just wanted to find out, what's the state of safety at sea? Or how do they think that's going to go? Is there anything online that people can check out if they want to improve their skills right now? And
great question. We have it on our calendar for the weekend of March 27, 28. But honestly, the Academy is not admitting the general public right now, and I don't foresee that happening by the end of March. We have another Safety at Sea planning meeting next week, actually. So I think what we'll wind up doing is just to give the Academy facilities people enough heads up, is we'll probably cancel that event. A lot of the national events have been canceled this year. There's nothing scheduled, spring or summer so far. We might be able to get back to it in the fall. Marine Trades is our partner in putting on this Safety at Sea event every year, Marine Trades Association of Maryland. We are looking at a May date with them and potentially a fall date. It just depends on the status of, the vaccine rollout and a number of other factors. It wouldn't be at the Academy. We have some temporary backup spaces sorted out, and we're kind of that's in our planning queue. I think everybody this year has gotten very creative. Semper Gumby, always flexible on trying to figure out how to do things safely. So we've got a couple backup plans. If those don't work out, U.S. Sailing does have basically the day one that we used to do at the Academy is now, all those topics are available online. There's a course that you can take. If you go to ussailing.org, you can get either the U.S. Sailing Offshore Certificate course, which is, I believe, 10 units, although I think we might have decided to go with 15, or the World Sailing is 15 topics. And if you take the hands-on portion of the course within the calendar year of taking that online course, then that gets you a World Sailing certificate. But you should check the notice of race for what event you want to do and decide on the level of training that you need for, from there. But they have done a nice job of doing the online videos. If you go to MTAM, Marine Trades Association of Maryland, mtam.org, we'll make announcements on our possible Mayday, and that would be for the hands-on portion. So that's where you get in the pool and get in the life raft and figure out how to right it if if it winds up getting flipped over by the wind and the waves. And
we'll definitely update SpinSheet readers on that too. So follow SpinSheet and check it out at spinsheet.com. I've only ever done the first day of safety at sea, and I'd turn around and do it again tomorrow because you think your brain is going to explode by the end of it, but they start sort of pummeling you with amazing information starting at 8 o'clock in the morning, and at the end of the day you're thinking, there's still so much. They've only scratched the surface, but I learned so much in one day, and it's such an impressive event. And I look forward to doing that again in person, but I'm sure the online stuff is really good too. I see that some links have been, thank you, Ed, put some links into the comment section here, which is great. We do have one more question. I think we have time for it. It was Stephen Toole's question. Sharb, you want to pop that one up? Well, I can just read it.
Oh, is that the wilderness first aid?
Yeah. Do you see wilderness first aid as a good proxy for safety at sea, or is safety at sea a whole different animal?
I would say the latter. Wilderness first aid is great for doing just the first aid portion of it, but safety at sea takes so many other things into account. Weather, sailing in heavy weather, damage control on boats, and we always get amazing speakers every year. We, get into the best in the industry, and in the water, portion of it as well. That's not something you're going to see in a wilderness first aid class. So this is pretty, as Molly said, it's pretty all encompassing on the topic list.
Yeah, and I have one little thing to recommend because I've taken it before and it's really good. And it's the Boat US Foundation has a couple of online courses, and I think they're $30 each. But I did the All About Marine Radio, and you can just Google Boat US All About Marine Radio, and I was surprised by how much I didn't know. And so I highly recommend that. We all have a little bit of time on our hands this winter. And Renee, we're a little bit beyond that last call because you're such an amazing guest and you have so much to say. When we're done tonight, if you wouldn't mind taking a peek through the comments, there might be a couple of stray comments there or questions that we didn't quite get to. I think we got to the most meaty ones, but sometimes we miss one, and we like to try to give people an answer if we can. But thank you so much for being our guest tonight. You're an amazing guest. Cheers.
Thanks,
Cheers
Molly.
to
Cheers.
you.
Great to
We
see
hope you
you.
will
Thanks.
come back. We will hope you will come back to SpinSheet Happy Hour and continue the fun. We'll come up with more subjects, and we wish you luck this spring and getting back on the water with the mids and getting that vaccine. So
Fingers crossed.
We're all rooting for you here.
Yes, thank you, Renee. Thank you, Molly. I'm going to throw you guys into the green room real quick, but don't go anywhere because you know why?
Because there's an after party in the green room.
Hey,
Have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you, Renee.
Thank you. I'll look through the comments.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody, for showing up tonight. Really appreciate it. Actually, I thought this was really very cool. There's always room for safety, obviously, when you go out there. So some people have been kind enough to share some links for U.S. Sailing and Storm Tri-Sail out there. But if you get an opportunity, I've taken a couple of these courses. These safety at sea courses are amazing. And obviously, in these times of COVID, it's hard to get out there and do the experiential safety at sea, if you will. But make it something that you make an effort to go out and do, because it is, you think you're prepared sometimes, but you're not. And these courses can really, really prepare you to think about things that you just probably aren't thinking about. The whole "I don't know what I don't know" kind of thing. So anyway, please check those out. Again, thanks to Mount Gay for sponsoring this. They've been supporting SpinSheet now for quite some time. And thank you guys. Every time you tune in, you help us out. And if you will, share this with friends. Say, hey, guys, the safety seminar or safety at sea thing that we just watched was awesome. They can watch it if they go to our Facebook page and it's the playlist. Remind them to like us on Facebook, all that kind of jazz. We're also on YouTube, so please subscribe to our channel there. And until next time, please be safe, obviously, and be careful out there. Stay